All right, we're rolling. What's up, guys? Welcome back to part 3 studio time series for OG Kush. Part 3 is going to consist of mastering this track, and I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently than I did in the last series. The last series for the song Desolate, I just used Ozone and only Ozone, and it sounded pretty good. This time I'm going to do it just a little bit differently. Okay, so let's get started. So what I did was I took the OG Kush mix rendered down track and just dragged it into Ableton, as you see here. So then from there, I'm going to find probably the loudest or the most busiest area of the song. So I'm going to choose a drop section. Okay, so what I can tell right now is my intro to the build, by looking at the waveform here, it's a little bit fatter than the actual drop, because the drop I got kind of squashed a little bit more to make everything level, whereas everything else, which would be the intro build and the bridge build, is kind of not. But the loudest areas that I see in the waveform is right at the peak of the build. So there's a little tip for that I'll be adding in here on the master track for that. So first thing I'm going to do is exactly that. I'm going to go to audio effects in Ableton, just using the stock plugins, and we're going to use utility. So then once utility is in, normally, well, first let's make this a little bigger so it's more visual. And then I'm going to open up the master track here so I can see everything. I'm going to change the source to utility and switch the utility option to gain. So right now, this line is 0 dB. So right here in this part of the song, it gets a little bit too much compared to the rest. Now I could throw a compressor on to try to make everything level, but I think what I'm going to do is just do volume, automate volume control instead. So from here, I'm just going to go like, let's say right about here in this section. So I'm just going to drop it just a little bit, just like that, kind of like a decline. So then if we listen and pay attention to the signal over here on the master track in the corner. So first, let's listen here and get an idea of where the signal is in the song, in the mix, and then in the area where it's going to be the loudest, with the decibels turned down, decline volume down just a little bit, we're going to see if our signal kind of stays the same. All right, so it looks like it gets a little loud, so we're going to go a little bit more right here. So I'm going to go Command Z to make it flat, and then I'm just going to grab the whole thing and just go a couple more decibels, and then I'm going to decline it. So from 0, we're going to drop it down to -5, almost -6 dBs. Now that's a little too much for me. Normally I like to do around -2 or 3 just so it kind of, stays level. But for this situation, we might have to go a little bit more. So let's look back at the signal. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, it worked. The signal stayed. But instead of having it being -5, almost -6, I'm just going to grab it and just try and go 1 decibel less. Right there, 464. So then once that is done, I'm going to take that same exact spot and I'm going to copy the envelope. And now I'm going to drag to the other spot and put it there as well. So now our overall mix is for the most part going to be level. We're still a little fat in this area compared to here, obviously, but we're going to fix that in mastering. I mean, it's best to do it in the mix, just so you guys know. Fix everything that you can in the mix, and then your mastering will become easier. But because we're this far, I'm going to show you the path of what it would take to fix it in this type of situation. All right, so with that being said, first thing I'm going to do is grab, what is it called? First, we're going to grab Ozone 8, but we're not going to use the auto detect stuff, okay? So bear with me. I know we're using Ozone like the last track, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. Maybe. We'll see. We got options. All right, so with that being said, we're going to take these out. We're going to look at the EQ and watch how it behaves during this section here, okay? Overall, the wave signal that's coming in is pretty good. We got a little bit of roll off on the end, but we could use a little bit more. So I'm just going to do just a smidge, not much. I only did minus 1.2 decibels for that. Next, I'm going to roll off the bass end here, nice and tight all the way over. Okay, next after that, I'm going to decide here in a minute if I need to do anything in this frequency range, because we're a little weak right here, whereas everything else is kind of level. But I kind of like it because it gives it more dynamics. All right, so next piece I'm going to add in is the, what's it called? Dynamics, exactly that. So this time, you can either hit the learn button right here and have it kind of judge what type of song you're feeding in, and it will try to come up with the best settings to place these. So for example, if we hit learn, right about there is where it thinks it's pretty good. But see, over here, we're at 188. We're actually going to bring that more to right about here. And I'm going to bring this one a little bit more over. And that area should be decent. So now we're going to solo out the low end. This might be hard to hear if you're listening to on a laptop. Earbuds might be able to pick it up depending on what kind you're doing. Same with headphones. And then obviously a sound system. You'll be able to hear it. Okay, now rule of thumb that I normally do with this is I make sure that I don't go past negative, I think it was -3. Yeah. And as you can see, for the compressor, we're at 2. I'm actually going to bring that up to 3 just to keep it in the safe area. But see, now you can see that this kind of bumps up a little more. So we're going to bring that back. All right, that's pretty good. Next. Oh, and don't forget that when you work on the next band, to click in that area. I've done that plenty of times where I'm doing tweaks and come to find out it was from the previous one that I've already done, so I would have to backtrack. So just make sure you click on the band that you want to work on. Next band. And as you can see, all of these I'm going 3 ratio across the board. I could be messing around with the release and the attack, but I kind of like where they are by default because it kind of keeps everything together instead of like bringing the release shorter and then it's like trying to bring everything back super quick. I like to keep everything kind of balanced out. Okay, next band. And yes, as you can see, I am soloing out each band so I can hear exactly what I am trying to work on. That might be why it sounds funny for those that don't know. All right, that's pretty safe. Small little tweaks. Hold on, I gotta get my Timmy hose out. All right, moving on. Next piece that I usually do is the dynamic EQ. Now this one is crucial to have. This is one toy that's nice that's kind of built into Ozone. There's plenty of other third-party plugins out there that will do the same thing. In fact, the Fab Filter Pro MB will do it. If I'm not satisfied with this one, with this EQ, dynamic EQ in this mix, I actually might be going over to Fab Filter for this part, and I'll just turn this one off. Okay, so what I'm doing is certain bands I'm going to be bringing down, and as you can see, the more, not really the more that you drag down, it's going to be dropping it when it's coming through the mix, because that is where everything is controlled in this area. Usually around the 2K is where the frequency that hurts your ears the most, and then of course right at the end. So these two areas of frequency you definitely want to tweak. And to show you, when I go to press if I hold down the Alt button and I kind of click and hold and drag through the frequency spectrum, you'll be able to tell which area hurts your ears. So the 2K and the 10K I would say for the most. So with that being said, this was just to show you an idea. I'm not actually going to be bringing it down that far. Oh, and keep in mind, if the audio is awfully quiet for you, it's just because we're working with the mix track, and the mix track is normally going to have a lower volume because we're going to be beefing everything up. Hence, mastering. All right, that's pretty good right there. The next piece I normally add in is the imager. Solo, or the sub section. Normally I bring it all the way down. That way it's just straight through the mix mono and it's not going to the stereo speakers on a house system. But I've been watching a lot of videos lately, whether it's correct or not, correct me if I'm wrong. Some people have been actually bringing this up a little bit more instead of just having it shoot straight in the middle. Because you do lose some, obviously, when you just bring it straight down, all the way down. I'm going to do it right about there. About 13 there. This band I'm not going to touch. Okay, so this part is what they call the exciter. I'm kind of amplifying these bands, kind of like a soft distortion amplifier. The triodes does it nice and real subtle, unless of course you crank it up for the amount. Normally when I use this effect, I will first crank up the amount. I'll leave the mix 100% because I want to hear exactly what I want to hear when I'm making the amp on it, on these bands. So then this one, the low end, I cranked it up, and then once I started hearing distortion, I would bring it back down until I don't hear it anymore. So for example, this would be distorted. And then you start bringing it back until it's gone. Four looks about good. All right, and then last but not least would be the maximizer. Now we're going to be doing this a little bit differently. We're going to be going IRC 4, transient. We're going to be going super fast on the character. But we're going to load up the FabFilter Pro limiter so we get a signal. And what I want to do is I want to set the threshold of the maximizer in ozone until we start seeing the wave signal in FabFilter become, it's going to become clipped, but not to the point where you lose a lot of transients. And right now, as you can see, it's getting really loud, so we're going to bring down the input. Actually, I think I'm doing this backwards. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, we were doing it backwards. Sorry about that. So the input you would leave alone, but the output you would bring down. So then, as you can see, the wave signal in FabFilter, everything just became the straight line across, but that's just because the threshold was pushed down way too far. So let's bring this back up and let's do it again. I think we're going to do it right about there because we got a little bit of limiting compression going on here on the wave signal in ozone. So it's not a lot going on, and that makes the wave signal in FabFilter only cut off a little bit on the top, just a hair. And you can see that the dynamics are still there because the wave is still breathing from the lower areas of the song. Lower areas of volume, if that makes any sense. All right, so then after that, what we would do is we're done with ozone. So we're going to close that out, but still have it run. And now the rest of the work is going to be in FabFilter. So FabFilter Pro L, I'm going to be using the dance preset for the dubstep. And the exact, even though it says dubstep, and you would think, oh yeah, just put on a dubstep track because that's the song that you're making. It's not just because of that. It's because it controls the punchy lows in the limiter. All right, so with that being said, this is going to be the part of the song where it's going to get louder. So I'm going to turn down the audio input here. So it's going to get quiet for a second. And then I'm going to start bringing up the FabFilter. All right, so as you can see, we got volume control, gain control for the loud sections of the build that we did earlier. We got ozone controlling 6 plugins technically. This EQ I actually have to touch up a little bit more, I believe. Dynamics is good. Dynamic EQ is good. Imager is set. Exciter is set. And the maximizer is perfect where it is. And then last but not least, FabFilter. And as you can see, I was just cycling, kind of like tweaking on purpose what it would do if you just crank the gain all the way up. Not much would change if you went like all the way up on it. And the reason why is because of perceived loudness. Now, when this is crushing, well, I don't know, compressing the audio, once the wave is clipped, you can't go any further than that. Like, here, let me show you. When I crank this all the way up, the red is just going to start showing down in here. And then it's going to show it also over here, showing you how much it's actually removing those elements from the audio. So right now I have it at 6 because I feel that that's the sweet spot where it's not too much and it's not too little, and the song is still loud, safe. All right, so then after that, with that being said, we're not going to clip in the signal of the master itself because of Fab Filter is the last effects in the effects chain. So if you look at the signal on the master track, it's exactly what I wanted to, because normally when I just use ozone for all the toys, the bells and whistles for mastering, I like to have the RMS at around -6 and then everything else just kind of cut off at 0. It doesn't go past it. That's pretty much it. If anything else, if we bring ozone back in and turn all the plugins off, that means nothing is running. It's just sitting here doing nothing. We're going to go to the codec, and you got two choices here, AAC and MP3. We're going to choose MP3, and the bit rate is going to be 320. So now we're going to pretend that you, the listener, is going to maybe purchase it on iTunes or SoundCloud or whatever. And when you convert a raw audio file, whether it's WAV, IF, into an MP3 at the best quality it can be, which is 320 kilobytes, which shows right here, this will give you representation if your song is clipping, meaning going past 0 dB. So then that would make your headphones... Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So then that would make your headphones, sorry about that. That would make your headphones sound a little distorted, and it will hurt your ears. Prolonged time, whatever you want to call that. We don't want that. We want it to sound good and not damage your ears. So, with that being said, MP3, 320 kilobytes, codec, and I'm going to turn it on. So over here on the master track of Ableton, you can see that we're 0.53 over 0 dB of this song. So if I converted this song down to an MP3 right now and put it out there for everyone to enjoy, it would be that much over 0, and it would be a little bit distorted. It could hurt your ears a little bit. You might not be able to notice, but long periods of time of listening to a track like this at that range of over 0 dB decibels, it will hurt your ears. So we want to make sure that that doesn't go over 0. With it being 0.53 of a decibel, we're okay, but you still want to get it to 0. If it was 1 decibel or more, then yeah, definitely we would doctor it up. But with that being said, let's just go ahead and fix this anyways, because we want it to be good. So with that being said, I'm going to go back to the previous ozone that's in here, and I'm going to look at the maximizer. And as I'm paying attention to the master over here is showing me that it's 0.60 clipping, we're going to go to the ceiling section here and go, just say -1. So that's a lot better. That's 0.19. So with that being said, let's go -1.2. Let's reset the meter here on Ableton, the yellow. And that's pretty good. It's showing that our overall peak is negative 0.17. So now we're actually a little bit below 0 dB. So that's perfect. So I'm going to close that out. I'm going to turn off the codec. And now we actually have the full song back instead of it interpreting an MP3. So I'm done with this plugin for Ozone because we were just using it for audio analysis stuff. So I'm going to pull that out of there. So with that being said, this mix is now done. But before I go ahead and render this down, or this master anyways, I'm going to go back to my Dynamics EQ and look at this wave signal one more time and just make sure that it's as clean as I can get it. All right, and that is how I do this version for mastering. Now, as for Ozone 8 goes, we could have actually separated those more instead of just having it all in Ozone, which is the whole point of Ozone 8, just having everything all together for plugins, your EQ, your dynamics, compressor, all that stuff. If you wanted to, you could do the same exact stuff that this is doing in Ableton to a certain extent. For example, the EQ, if we were to, let's see if I can do this. If we were to add this EQ into Ableton, we would take the EQ8, not the EQ3, and then just do the same exact stuff that we did just like that. So then now if we did dynamics compression, that is where you would take the multi-band dynamics and go multi-band compression. And then for this one, it only does your low, mid, and high. It doesn't give you 4 bands like this one does. So you would lose a little bit, but not really, because you would just make your tweaks and it would be close to Ozone's one. And then dynamic EQ, Ableton does not have one of those for a stock plugin. I'm pretty sure other DAWs probably do, like, what is it? What's the FL Studio? I think they have one that's similar to this where it does the ducking for you in the EQ. But moving on, as for the imager goes, This is always everyone's favorite because you're able to add and control the spread in the different bands of the song. This one, the best way that I would be able to do it, you could easily take a utility and just drag it in, and where it says the width right here, right now 100% is just normal. If you were to drag this up and start going higher, you're now spreading everything, and I mean every band. And then if you were to bring it below 100, now you're making everything mono. So what I would do for that one is I would do an audio effects rack, and then I would add in the multiband dynamics default. Actually put that in the wrong spot. I would expand, is it, crap, I think it's that one. Let's drag this over. I would put the default multiband dynamics right in here. So then I would do it 3 times. Let's get rid of this one. And I would rename these like high, medium, and low, or high, mid, low, however you want to call it. And then if this one was the low, I would solo out the low, solo out the medium, and solo out the high. And then on every effect for your high, mid, and low, we would add the utility to it. I would just drag it right on that one. So let's just rename this so that it's easier to follow. So this is easier to understand because I like to name everything. Otherwise, I'd be like, oh crap, which one's the mid, which one's the low? Because they could be rearranged or whatever. So in the high, we added the utility. So just the high band, we could say we would want 36% stereo spread. The low, we would drag it in on the low and say the low end, we would want it to be that much width, that much narrow, because we're going lower. So then that means it would become mono. So then this whole little rack that we just put together was replacing Ozone 8's imager that you see here. Then after that, the exciter, it'd be along the same lines where you would add an audio effects rack, and you can use like, what is it, Ableton's amplifier default, and choose, here, let me get rid of some of this. And choose the default amp and choose clean, and then you control your low, mid, high, presence, gain, how much you want it to be used, dry and wet, whether it's going to be on the bass, the low end track, so it would be mono, whereas dual would be stereo, so that would be your mids and your highs. And then that way it would give you control like you do here in the exciter for Ozone. So it's all similar. It's just kind of laid out more user friendly in Ozone. And then the maximizer, that would be your limiter. So then your limiter in Ableton, which they do call it the limiter, which is nice, unlike some of this other stuff. Like, for example, I want an amplifier, but I want it to be marshmallows. Does that mean it's, what is that? Does that mean it's going to be kind of mellow? Marshmallows? So they kind of made it silly? It's like, let's get a little more professional terms here. Or like EQ8, drums. Oh, that one's actually okay. Some of these presets, unless I'm thinking older versions of Ableton, it was kind of hard to understand. Like slow motion drive for frequency shifter. Obviously, that means whatever tweaks that it's going to be making, it's going to be slow motion, subtle movement stuff where it's not so much in your face of an effect. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. All right. So the limiter or the maximizer in Ozone, that would be right here. So then your limiter, the ceiling is actually right here. Whereas the threshold, what you would want to do to compensate that, because that's just a compressor, you would add in a compressor, whether you want the normal one or the glue compressor. So if we just dragged in the default compressor, here is your threshold. So then your character, meaning fast and slow, that would be your release. And then your overall output right here would be your overall output here. And that's it. So negative 7.4, I could easily just type that in, negative 7.4. And it's going to be doing the peaks. It's going to make up, meaning it's going to clean it up a little bit, make it nice and smooth for compressing. The release, we had it really fast in ozone, so we would bring that down a little bit more. And then the ceiling was negative 1.2. And there it is. There's ozone's maximizer. Now, the only thing we would lose is the modes. The modes, the IRC LL 1, 2, 3, and 4 with the different options of classic, modern, transient. Those are replicating actual analog equipment. As for the stereo independence and the transient emphasis by default it's turned on. No, actually it's turned off by default. When you start bringing that up, it's going to try to save some of your transients if you're losing those sounds in your mix, in your master. As for stereo independence, it's kind of similar to that. You got your transients and then sustain in order to control the transients. You would lose that if you just went with this and this. So yeah, just a little side subject of everything, that it is possible to do this stuff without ozone. You don't have to have ozone. Okay, so that pretty much sums it up. So before I render this down, let's give it a listen. The overall master of OG Kush. And I'm going to make sure that I'm not blasting you out, because I noticed we were in the yellow, and that's good, but just want to make sure.
Kush is my cologne, and I'm smoking out the zone. smoking out the zone.
Okay, there's one little thing that I have to do a tweak that I can tell just by listening in these headphones, the Sony headphones here. There's a frequency that I feel is a little bit piercing to the ears, and I'm pretty sure, I don't think it's the 2K frequency. It's a little bit, what would it be this way to you? A little bit higher. So before the limiter, I am going to add the spectral shaper. Now what this one does, you can do this inside of Ozone as a whole, but this makes it so that you can just work on this plugin only. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the frequency range a little bit closer, and we're going to solo out this band. Let's bring it towards the drop area. That's the frequency that I feel that is kind of piercing the ears a little bit. So with that being said, think of this like a side chain compressor. You get light, medium, and heavy. Let's just leave it on default and go with medium. And we're gonna solo it and listen. And I'm going to slowly start bringing down the threshold to kind of start ducking that frequency a little bit. And then when I turn off solo, see, now normally my mind is telling me the signal that's showing here at the bottom, you would think you'd want the threshold line to be touching it, but actually you don't. You want to see the ceiling level coming in, the ducking of it, of that frequency range. And you can listen to it soloed out and try to make your tweaks, but you're not going to notice any much difference. You'll notice it when you listen to it as a whole. The listen button and the solo button is just so that you can find the frequency range that you're trying to diminish a little bit. And that's it. That's actually perfect right there. I just wanted a little bit of the signal to be kind of diminished. I didn't want to do it heavy. And as for the attack release tone, that I leave alone because I'm just trying to bring it down. This is if you wanted to like get more finer into that frequency and control what it's doing even further. But I don't need to go that far. So with that being said, the song is now done. All right, so let's render this down. First, let's bring this a little bit smaller and make sure we have the whole song selected, which we do. We're gonna render, export AIFF 44.1, 24-bit, no dither. Actually, you know, we could do the dither. I usually don't use dither in Ableton. I think what I'm going to do is go back to Ozone here and throw Dither on, and we'll just leave everything the way that it is. Give it a quick listen. And dithering is just for mastering purposes, for having your media sound, in my terms, good on any device. Not really device, but any music player, if that makes sense. It's really hard to explain, but dither usually should be on your master track. Whether it's a soft dither, a heavy dither, depending on the style of music that you're going for. That's just what I rock. All right, let's render this down now. Export. Music, Ableton, the Yep project. And this is going to be DJ Bone, OG Kush, bracket master. And that is part 3 of Studio Time series for OG Kush. I hope you enjoyed the different method that I used here for mastering. Going a little out of the zone of using Ozone, if that makes any sense. I think my next track, I'm actually going to split it even further and try to stay away from Ozone, just to show, you know what, heck, I might even just use stock plugins only. So with me using Ableton, we'll see what we get of an end product with just using stock plugins of Ableton for mastering a song. That way everyone can be on the same page, because not everyone has the same plugins that certain individuals like myself might be using. But I hope you enjoyed. This coming Friday, the 26th, the song Enemy will be released. iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, Google Play Store, everywhere. Check it out. Hope you like it. And if you have any comments, questions, go ahead, throw them down in the comments below. Hope you liked it, and subscribe if you want. And I'll be throwing a link in the description below for the free download for this track. That way you can have the product of what we were together on creating this track. All right, guys, until next time, peace.